Well, there's no question that we have some pretty systemic challenges here in the state. Two things about me that I think are incredibly important for the Democratic nominee and certainly as for the next governor if we're going to take on the challenges of economic inequality. One, I'm a lifelong public servant. I worked in the Clinton administration, White House Office of Cabinet Affairs. I ran FEMA for New England. I worked for Senator Kerry for 4 years. I was his point person for small business and economic development. I'm a third-generation combat veteran. I enlisted in the Navy a little bit after 9/11 because America was under attack and because we have a family history in the military. And I did a 1-year deployment. I think that's very important at this point in time for someone who has worked for the people of this country, for the people of the Commonwealth, for most of his adult life is incredibly important. The second thing that I think is incredibly important, I'm the only candidate in the race that's been elected to be a chief executive. I believe we need systemic change around how we do budgeting on Beacon Hill. At this moment, we have a state government that is failing. Last year, Standard & Poor's downgraded the bond rating of the state of Massachusetts for the first time in 30 years. We need to have a governor that not only understands we need to raise revenue, which I believe, but also believes in transparent, outcome-based budgeting. This is what I did in Newton for 8 years. I turned around a fiscal crisis, $40 million, 2 of the worst conditioned school buildings in the state, 1 AAA bond rating that was in danger of being downgraded. We are building 5 new schools in the next 6 years in Newton. We have 2 AAA bond ratings. We are rebuilding our roads, our sidewalks, fire stations, reinstating public safety officials that we lost before I became mayor. We eliminated the $40 million structural deficit. We grew a rainy day fund that didn't exist to $22 million. I point to how we got there around our transparency, our budget decisions being driven by outcomes, but also the fact that I wasn't afraid to ask my residents to raise revenue. And we did that in the form of a tax override package. We need to do that at the state level, and we need a governor that is going to change the way we do budgeting, that is going to be transparent, and that isn't afraid to be honest about the fact that we've got to ask people, for example, making $1 million a year more, $20,000 a week, to contribute more to revenue so that we can make improvements. I mentioned education. We're underfunding public education right now, K through 12. We need to fully fund it. We need to redo Chapter 70. I know there's legislation on Beacon Hill that attempts to do that, Sonia Chang-Giaz and others, but we've got to make sure we do that we redo that formula so it reflects the needs of children coming in the classroom. We have to make sure we add to public education after-school enrichment, summer enrichment, and early childhood. And I also had mentioned free public college. These are real investments in people that need to be made. I'm a chief executive that got things done, and I would do the same thing at the state level.
Well, I'm the only candidate in the race that has leadership experience in state government and in the private sector. I think that's going to matter. We all, as you mentioned, have a very ambitious, progressive agenda that we want to deliver on as governor. But I've actually been in a leadership position in state government. When I worked for Governor Patrick, I was his Secretary of Administration and Finance. And I often was his point person for negotiating a lot of the big reform legislation we got through the legislature. So I've been there, I've done it, I know how the process works, I've worked successfully through it. I think that that should matter because I think I'm best positioned as a result of that experience to deliver on the ambitious agenda we all want. The other thing is, Governor Baker's entire case for being governor is he's a great manager. He's actually failed at it. Every single thing he said he was going to fix as governor is worse than when he started. And I think to win in the general election, we're going to need to credibly take him on and expose those failings. I think based on my leadership experience and record of success in government and in the private sector, I'm best positioned to do that. I'm going to be able to make apples to apples comparisons and say things like, hey, when I was there managing the state budget during much tougher times, during the Great Recession, we managed through it successfully. We increased investment to record levels in infrastructure, public education, and we got the highest bond ratings in state history. And Governor Baker, you've screwed it up. You just got downgraded by one of the rating agencies for the first time in 30 years because you aren't following the responsible policies we put in place when I was there. I think that type of exposure of his failings and the ability to be able to take him on those issues in an apples-to-apples kind of way is going to matter for viability in the general election. Looking at the strength of our campaign so far, We have a lot of enthusiasm behind our campaign. I think we've already demonstrated that we are capable of building a strong campaign. We have thousands of supporters across this state. I've been going to meetings across the state for over a year now, Democratic Town Committee meetings, House parties, and we have lots of enthusiasm, lots of people signing up to help. We have, I think, outperformed the other candidates from a fundraising perspective, in terms of the caucuses that are going on now, where people are coming and showing up to run for delegate to the state convention. We've been doing very well in terms of organizing for the caucuses and have a lot of great results. So I think our campaign has a lot of momentum. We've got a lot of political support. Many more Democratic legislators have endorsed our campaign than either of the other two candidates. I'm feeling very encouraged by the level of momentum and strength our campaign has, and I think that also demonstrates that we can take on Charlie Baker, continue to build on this strength of our campaign, and be in a position at the end of the day where people are going to be informed about the choice in this race, which is going to be between a governor who has no record of making any meaningful difference on any issue that affects people's lives in a real way, and literally has no agenda to do so, and someone who desperately wants to do so and has the leadership experience to deliver on it. And at the end of the day, I think people are going to choose that.
Well, I know that sometimes when people look at me and I'm in a suit, they think, well, this guy looks like some retired white investment banker, and how much real leadership can we expect from him? The thing that I really want people to understand is that my heart burns with a desire for justice. And that comes out of my own experiences, some of which were very difficult, beginning in my childhood. I was born with a serious chronic illness, a genetic illness called hemophilia. Hemophilia causes internal bleeding in your joints and comes up quickly, goes down slowly. And so by the time I was 4 years old, I lost the ability to walk. I was in leg braces, I was in a wheelchair, and I certainly learned what it was like to walk into a room and have people be afraid of you before you even opened your mouth. I'm a very gregarious and extroverted child, and children were just instinctively afraid of me. And so I learned at an early age that sometimes there's nothing you can do. People are going to judge you. They're going to discriminate against you. But what that means then is that our principles, our values of inclusion, of being welcoming, of believing in equality are critical to overcoming that natural human instinct. And then I went on. Because of these injections that I received to treat my hemophilia, I also discovered in 1984 that I had HIV. And so, in a sense, I was part of that group of people, including many gay Americans who were feared. And again, there was serious talk of taking everyone with HIV and putting them in quarantine on an island. So, being part of a community that was feared and that was misunderstood, and being part of a country that was wrestling whether to become cruel or compassionate. Eventually, I think we reached a level of compassion. And then finally, at the very end of that process, I ended up getting hepatitis and hepatitis C. And the good news is that I got a liver transplant, and it cured everything. Turned out I had a genetic resistance to HIV. It turns out the hepatitis was cured, and even my original hemophilia was cured. But what does that do when you go through a series of problems like that? First of all, it trains you to realize that you can be anyone and go through a problem where suddenly you need a lot of help from your community, from the government. It's not because you did something wrong, it's because life happened and suddenly we need each other. And the second thing is you realize life is precious. You don't have that much time. None of us has that much time. So we should really live according to the values, the deepest values. We should work on the things that we care about the most, and we should be the kind of people we most want to be, because we don't have an unlimited amount of time. That's certainly a level of urgency, enthusiasm, compassion, focus, I like to think backbone, that came out of those tough experiences that I would bring to being governor. And I think in talking to people, they can sense that I understand some things about the underlying tragedy or difficulty of life, and that we are here to nurture and support each other, and that includes government. And so that's what I hope, that recognition And that spirit of urgency to work on the things that really matter, that's at the heart of why I want to offer my leadership to the state.